and said, we'll give you 5 first-round picks for Josh Allen, the Bills would laugh at them. You could offer them 10 first-round picks, they'd turn it down. Whereas,
if you thought the NFL offseason was quiet, think again, because what just detonated behind closed doors didn't sound like strategy. It sounded like panic. This is Spill News, where secrets don't leak, they explode. It started with whispers, then pauses, then a few calm words that felt way too heavy to be accidental. A veteran voice, a familiar face, and suddenly, the story the Cleveland Browns have been selling for months began to crack in real time. Kevin Stefanski wasn't yelling, he wasn't tweeting, but insiders say the pressure hit all at once. And when it did, the locker room felt it, because hovering right behind the scenes was one name nobody could ignore anymore: Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback they told you wasn't ready. The same quarterback who kept winning anyway. The internet couldn't believe it, and you won't either. Group chats lit up, clips replayed. Fans started asking the question nobody wanted answered. Why does this feel like a cover story falling apart? One viral comment summed it up best. Bro said too much, and now they can't walk it back. So let me ask you this. If you were in that locker room, same pressure, same politics, same quiet betrayal, would you stay silent, or would you finally speak up? Because what you're about to hear doesn't just challenge a decision. It challenges the entire narrative. Let's break it all down. And trust me, it gets uglier. It didn't start with a press conference. And it definitely didn't start with a headline, like most real scandals. This one began quietly, buried under routine practices, control quotes, and a public narrative that sounded clean enough to believe. The Cleveland Browns were selling stability, process, patience.
The fix is in, people. Come on, man. Look at this. Look at this nonsense, man. Look at this.
Development. The same words recycled week after week until fans stopped questioning them. But inside the building, according to people familiar with the situation, something felt off long before anyone said it out loud. At the center of that tension stood Kevin Stefanski, a coach known league-wide for structure and composure. Calm answers, analytical phrasing, no wasted emotion. For years, that image worked. It protected him. It bought him credibility. But what happens when calm starts sounding less like confidence and more like control? That's the question that quietly started circulating among veterans, assistants, and people whose job depends on reading rooms before they explode. Because the quarterback room didn't feel normal. On paper, everything made sense. Depth charts were clean. Practice reports were careful. Public explanations stayed on message. But players noticed the small things first. Who got second chances? Whose mistakes were explained away? Whose success was described as encouraging instead of earned? In the NFL, those details matter. Veterans especially know when development is real, and when it's just a word used to buy time. That's where Brian Hoyer enters the picture. Hoyer isn't flashy. He isn't loud. He doesn't chase attention. 15 years in the league taught him one thing above all else: speak carefully or don't speak at all. Teammates describe him as observant, almost quiet to a fault. A locker room lifer who understands politics as well as playbooks. So he appeared on local Cleveland media and began talking about quarterback development. The people who know him felt it immediately. This wasn't filler. This wasn't generic analysis. This was measured, intentional, and dangerous. Hoyer didn't accuse anyone. He didn't raise his voice. He talked about reps, about honesty, about how young quarterbacks learn faster when evaluation matches reality. He talked about trust eroding when players feel stories are being shaped instead of told. And then, almost casually, he mentioned Stefanski. Not once, not twice. Enough times for listeners to rewind the clip and ask themselves why. The pauses did more damage than the words. Suddenly, the Browns' carefully crafted offseason narrative didn't feel as solid. Fans replayed the segment. Analysts slowed it down. Social media filled the gaps. And hovering in the background of every conversation was a name that had already been making some people uncomfortable: Shedeur Sanders. Publicly, the messaging was consistent. Talented but raw. Promising but not ready. A long-term project. Developmental. Safe words. non-threatening words. But according to people who observed practices closely, Sanders wasn't moving like a project. He was moving like someone who already understood tempo, pressure, and command. The kind of quarterback who doesn't panic when the pocket collapses, who doesn't look to the sideline for reassurance. Defenders notice first, then assistants, then veterans who had no reason to hype a rookie unless it was obvious. Sanders recognized disguises quickly. He adjusted protections without drama. He spoke in the huddle like he belonged there. Those are things coaches usually praise loudly. But in this case, the praise stayed quiet. That disconnect became impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, the depth chart stayed frozen. Decisions that were supposed to evolve didn't. And every press conference sounded more rehearsed than the last. When asked about competition, Stefanski emphasized patience. When asked about flashes, he emphasized process. To some, it sounded reasonable. To others, it sounded defensive. Inside the locker room, confusion grew. According to insiders, players started asking questions without asking questions. Body language changed. Conversation stopped mid-sentence when certain staff members walked in. The room didn't explode. It fractured slowly, the way trust always does. And then came the part nobody expected. Hoyer's comments didn't fade after one news cycle. They lingered. Blogs picked them up. Fan pages clipped them. People started connecting dots between what they were seeing on the field and what they were hearing off it. Suddenly, the quarterback discussion wasn't just about football, it was about honesty. Why did Sanders look composed in limited opportunities? Why did internal practice reports quietly praise him while public quotes downplayed him? Why did Stefanski's explanations feel increasingly rigid? Those questions don't disappear once they're asked. As pressure mounted externally, sources claim internal conversations became tense. Not shouting matches, not blow-ups. The kind of quiet disagreements that signal deeper problems. The kind where people stop pretending alignment exists. Some staff members reportedly questioned whether early evaluations had boxed the team into a corner. Others worried about what admitting that would mean for reputations. In the NFL, admitting you were wrong isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. Hoyer, whether intentionally or not, became the catalyst. His reputation insulated him from accusations of clout chasing. Nobody could say he didn't understand locker rooms. Nobody could dismiss him as uninformed. And that's why his calm tone hit harder than any rant ever could. Fans flooded social media. One post went viral overnight. This doesn't feel like development. This feels like protection. Another read, why does it sound like someone's trying to be right instead of trying to win? The narrative was slipping. And once that happens, control becomes impossible. What made it worse was timing. Expectations weren't low. Ownership wanted progress. The fan base wanted clarity. And suddenly, the quarterback room symbolized something much bigger than depth charts. It became a referendum on leadership. Sanders, for his part, stayed quiet. No cryptic posts. No interviews. No frustration leaks. According to teammates, he showed up early, worked late, and spoke with confidence that didn't need validation. That silence only amplified everything else. Because when a player refuses to complain and still forces conversation, people notice. By the end of the week, the tension was undeniable. The Browns were still publicly unified, but internally, lines had begun to form. Not sides, exactly. Perspectives. And once perspectives harden, they don't soften easily. What started as a discussion about development had turned into a question of trust. And as the pressure built, one thing became clear to everyone watching closely. This wasn't going to stay quiet much longer, because what came next didn't just escalate the story. It exposed how fragile the entire situation really was. The shift didn't happen all at once. There was no announcement, no dramatic leak that forced the organization to respond overnight. Instead, the story entered its most dangerous phase, the one where speculation, half-truths, and internal anxiety collide. According to people familiar with the situation, this was the moment when leadership stopped thinking about football decisions and started thinking about damage control. Because once fans stopped debating who should start and begin questioning why they're being told what they're told, The problem is no longer the depth chart, it's credibility. Behind the scenes, the quarterback room reportedly became the most closely watched space in the building. Reps were counted, interactions were noticed, assistants became careful about what they said and who they said around. According to insiders, even routine film sessions carried a different weight. Players weren't just watching tape anymore. They were watching reactions. Who got corrected publicly? Who got pulled aside privately? Who was protected and who was tested? And that's where the cracks widened. Multiple sources claim that in closed practices, Sanders continued to perform a level of control that didn't match the public framing. He wasn't perfect. No rookie is, but he was decisive, calm, efficient, the kind of quarterback who doesn't need extra explanation because he already understands the mistake before the coach finishes the sentence. According to one account, during a situational drill against a top defensive unit, Sanders ran the offense cleanly enough that coaches cut the period short, not because it failed, but because it worked too well. That story never made it to press. Instead, the familiar language continued. Development, long-term view, trust the process. Safe phrases that sound reasonable until they're repeated too often. Inside the locker room, players reportedly began exchanging looks. The kind of looks that say, "Are we watching the same thing?" At the same time, attention shifted toward the other side of the equation. Dylan Gabriel, once framed as stability, began drawing quiet scrutiny. His struggles were contextualized. Timing issues, scheme fit, protection breakdowns. According to insiders, those explanations didn't bother players on their own. What bothered them was the imbalance. When Sanders succeeded, the praise stayed muted. When Gabriel struggled, the excuses got louder. That contrast is poison in a locker room. Then came the moment that pushed everything from tense to volatile. A social media clip began circulating late one night, not from a verified source, not from a reporter, from someone close enough to feel the frustration, but removed enough to speak recklessly. A TikTok live, allegedly from Gabriel's girlfriend, hinting that internal favoritism was shaping decisions more than performance. The video didn't last long. It didn't need to. Screen recording spread within minutes. Group chats exploded. Whether the claims were accurate almost didn't matter anymore. The perception alone was enough to cause panic. According to people familiar with internal reactions, that clip triggered urgent conversations with upper management, not accusations. Questions. Why does this perception exist? Why are outsiders comfortable implying politics? And why does this story feel believable to fans? Those are the kinds of questions coaches hate answering because they don't have clean football answers. Around the same time, the injury report appeared. An injury that didn't have a clear origin. No obvious moment. No visible incident. Just enough information to explain absence without inviting follow-up. Fans noticed. Analysts noticed. And once again, silence did more damage than explanation. The absence created space, and space invites theories. Blogs ran with it. Fan pages speculated. Anonymous sources began appearing in comment sections claiming insider knowledge. Some stories were exaggerated. Some were clearly false, but a few felt too specific to ignore. According to several widely shared posts, Sanders was consistently outperforming expectations in practice, while being downplayed publicly to avoid forcing a decision. True or not, the narrative stuck because it aligned with what people thought they were seeing. Inside the building, tension reportedly escalated. Not emotionally, strategically. Meetings became more frequent. Language became more careful. According to insiders, the word alignment surfaced repeatedly. Alignment between staff. Alignment between evaluation and messaging. Alignment between reality and narrative. When that word starts getting repeated, it usually means alignment no longer exists. Leadership, according to sources, defended the approach. Long-term vision, structure, avoiding hype-driven decisions, reasonable arguments on paper. But the room wasn't fully convinced, because at some point, process stops being a shield and starts becoming a wall. Meanwhile, Sanders' role quietly expanded. More reps, more responsibility. more involvement in high-leverage situations. Observers noted his demeanor never changed. No celebration, no visible vindication, just work. That consistency made him harder to dismiss. It also made the contrast sharper. While narratives shifted around him, he stayed still, and that stillness became its own form of pressure. Veteran voices began echoing concerns first raised by Hoyer. Not loudly, not directly, but enough to notice. Former players discussed the situation in abstract terms on podcasts, talking about ego, about coaches protecting evaluations, about young quarterbacks being slowed down to avoid uncomfortable conversations. No names needed. Everyone knew who they were talking about. Media coverage split. Some reporters defended leadership, emphasizing patience and warning against rushing decisions. Others began asking more pointed questions about transparency and internal consistency. Fans accused certain outlets of soft-pedaling criticism. Others accused critics of manufacturing drama. The discourse itself became chaotic, which only deepened the sense that something was being hidden. And then came the on-field moment that shifted perception completely. A game, not a miracle performance, not a historic stat line, just composure. Sanders was given extended opportunity, and he didn't flinch. He stood in against pressure, made anticipatory throws, managed the huddle. Analysts praised his poise. Fans responded instantly. Clips went viral. Suddenly, the not-ready narrative sounded outdated. After that game, everything felt different. Press conference questions sharpened. Language tightened. Explanations shortened. According to insiders, internal evaluations shifted rapidly, even if no one admitted it publicly. The room had seen enough. The question was no longer if Sanders could handle the moment. It was whether leadership could handle admitting it. Hoyer, in subsequent appearances, didn't retreat. He also didn't escalate. He continued speaking about principles, about trust, about how locker rooms fracture when merit feels secondary to pride. To many listeners, it sounded less like theory and more like confirmation. By this point, the story had outgrown football. It was about accountability, about how organizations respond when reality challenges their plans, about whether leaders adjust or double down. And just when it seemed like the controversy had reached its peak, another layer began forming quietly behind the scenes. Conversations that weren't about quarterbacks anymore, but about futures, careers, power. Because once a narrative collapses publicly, the fallout never stays contained. And what emerged next didn't just complicate the story, it threatened to change the balance entirely. By the time the situation reached this point, it no longer felt like a quarterback controversy. It felt like an organizational reckoning. According to people close to the building, the tone inside the Browns facility shifted from debate to calculation, not about who should start next week, but about who would be left standing if this spiraled any further. Because once trust fractures at the top, it doesn't stay contained. It trickles. Assistants feel it first, then veterans, then young players who start learning lessons that have nothing to do with football, lessons about silence, about survival, about watching what happens when reality collides with ego. Kevin Stefanski, once praised for control and composure, now found that same control working against him. Every word he spoke publicly was dissected, not just by fans, but by people inside the building who knew exactly what wasn't being said. According to insiders, meetings grew smaller, information tightened, decisions that were once collaborative became centralized. That kind of shift doesn't happen unless pressure is real. Players noticed immediately. Veterans began asking quieter questions, not confrontational ones, strategic ones. What's the plan if this continues? What happens if the locker room loses faith? Who's really being evaluated here, the quarterback or the coach? Those questions don't get written down, but they shape behavior. Once players start protecting themselves emotionally, performance always follows. Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders continued doing the one thing that made the situation impossible to control. He kept playing well, not spectacularly, not recklessly, just consistently. According to teammates, his confidence didn't look like arrogance. It looked like certainty. He didn't celebrate opportunities. He treated them like expectations. That mindset unsettled some people and inspired others. Because nothing threatens a protected narrative more than someone who refuses to play the role assigned to them. At the same time, the fallout around Dylan Gabriel quietly resolved itself. The injury report lingered. His presence faded. According to sources, conversations about his future happened long before fans realized anything had changed. Some inside sympathized with him, believing he was caught in a situation that outgrew football. Others saw his gradual disappearance as proof that the original plan had failed. Either way, the contrast was unavoidable. Sanders' role expanded. The offense adjusted. The rhythm improved. And without any formal announcement, the story began rewriting itself in real time. Analysts shifted tone. Media members reframed previous takes. No one wanted to admit they had misread the situation, but most quietly adjusted. That's how narratives survive, not by being corrected, but by being replaced. Still, the damage was already done. Inside the league, this situation became a cautionary tale. Former players referenced it in broader conversations about leadership and evaluation. Commentators use it as an example of how quickly control can slip when transparency falters. Coaches around the league paid attention, not because of Sanders alone, but because of what his rise revealed about the organization managing him. And hovering over all of it was the shadow of Brian Hoyer. He never clarified his comments, never issued a follow-up, never walked anything back. According to people who know him, that silence was intentional. He had said what he needed to say. Anything more would dilute it. His restraint only amplified the weight of his original words. Because when a veteran speaks once and then goes quiet, it signals confidence in the truth. Speculation about ownership involvement grew louder. Not ultimatums, not public pressure. Concern, the kind that leads to internal reviews and uncomfortable conversations. Fans read between the lines. Media hinted at it cautiously. Once job security becomes part of the discussion, authority shifts whether anyone wants it to or not. Stefanski, regardless of outcome, would carry this chapter with him. Even if the team moved forward successfully, the questions wouldn't disappear. Could this have been handled differently? Was patience real, or was it protection? Did ego delay progress? Or was this simply the unavoidable chaos of high-stakes decision-making? Those questions don't need answers to do damage. They just need to exist. What makes this story linger isn't who eventually won the job. It's how close everything came to unraveling, how quickly trust eroded, how one veteran's carefully chosen words cracked a narrative wide open, how a young quarterback's silence spoke louder than any press conference ever could. The Browns may stabilize. Seasons will pass. Headlines will change. But inside the league, this moment will be remembered, not as a scandal, but as a warning that narratives are fragile, that players always see more than fans realize, and that truth doesn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in pauses, in tone shifts, in consistency that refuses to be ignored. Shedeur Sanders didn't need to demand anything. His play did the talking. Brian Hoyer didn't need to accuse anyone. His experience carried the message. And Kevin Stefanski didn't lose control in one dramatic moment. It slipped gradually under the weight of a story that refused to stay contained. Because in the end, the most dangerous thing in professional sports isn't a bad decision. It's pretending you don't see what's right in front of you. Now here's the part they never prepare for. Not the press conference, not the apology tour, not the carefully worded statements drafted to smooth everything over. The part where fans decide what they believe, regardless of what they're told next. After everything you've heard, one thing is clear. This wasn't just about football. It was about ego colliding with reality, about silence becoming louder than spin, about how quickly control disappears once people stop buying the story. So ask yourself this. If you were in that locker room, watching it unfold every day, would you have spoken up? Or would you have stayed quiet to protect your place? Because this story isn't over. Not even close. Decisions were made. Trust was tested. And the consequences of this moment will echo far beyond one season. Some people call it growth. Others call it exposure. But one thing is undeniable. once the truth finds daylight, it never goes back into the dark. And now it's on you. Because after everything you just heard, this isn't just a Brown story anymore. It's a lesson in how power, ego, and silence collide in professional sports. This wasn't one bad call. This wasn't one bad week. This was months of narrative management, finally running into reality. So ask yourself this, honestly. When a veteran speaks carefully, when a young quarterback stays silent but keeps delivering, when leadership keeps repeating the same explanation while the evidence keeps changing, who do you believe? Was this really patience? Or was it protection? Was this development? Or was it denial dressed up as process? Because the most uncomfortable part of this story isn't who played or who sat. It's how close everything came to breaking before anyone admitted there was a problem. How quickly trust evaporates when people feel like they're being sold a version of the truth instead of the whole thing. And here's the part nobody in the building can control anymore. You. Fans decide what narratives survive. Fans decide who gets grace. Fans decide when explanations stop working. So drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't hold back. Who do you think really lost control here? Did the locker room split because of talent or because of ego? And if you were in that building, would you have spoken up or stayed quiet to protect your spot? If you want the real stories, not the sanitized press conference versions, hit that subscribe button, because the situation isn't finished and the next chapter is already forming behind closed doors. Like the video if you caught something others missed. Share it if you think someone's avoiding the real conversation. And stay locked in, because if you think this was the ending, you haven't been paying attention.